USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Learn more and get a quote at usaa.com/bundle. Restrictions apply.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
Today's episode is one that many parents will want to tune into. We're talking all about ultra-processed foods, or UPFs. We're joined by the brilliant Charlotte Stirling-Reed.
Look at the bigger picture. What are we doing the majority of the time? And trying to make sure that as much as we can, we're feeding our kids stuff that we are making at home.
I feel like it's kind of become a little bit of a buzzword, and we're seeing like UPFs everywhere. What actually is it?
Your baby are soaking up all this information in their brain, and the more you can get them to learn about food, the more they will accept it, not right away necessarily, but over time. And like I say, register. What do we do with this?
Hello, I'm Pip, and welcome to the Midwife Pip podcast, the home of expert information and real chats on all things pregnancy, birth, and beyond. Today's episode is one that many parents will want to tune into. We're talking all about ultra-processed foods, or UPFs, and what they really mean for our children's health. To help us unpack this complex and often confusing topic, we're joined by the brilliant Charlotte Stirling-Reed, a leading child nutritionist, author, and mum who's passionate about helping families build healthy relationships with food from the very start. Charlotte's worked with everyone from the NHS to celebrities like Joe Wicks, and she's known for her practical, down-to-earth advice that actually works in real life. But Charlotte isn't just a best-selling author anymore. She's also been seen on our screens recently through her Panorama documentary and also on This Morning. So what are ultra-processed foods? Are they really as bad as the headlines suggest? And how can we balance convenience with nutrition when feeding our children? Let's find out. So welcome, Charlotte, and thank you so much, because you are a very busy lady.
Yeah, well, yes, it's been a very busy couple of weeks, but I'm very excited to be here. So thank you for having me.
Very busy sharing such important stuff. You have, and I know we've chatted about this behind the scenes, you've opened my eyes up so much. I felt like I kind of knew what I was doing with the whole nutrition thing on my second child, and I was like, oh no, there's more to learn.
There's always more to learn, but I think even, for me, I learn about nutrition with kids all the time, whether it be from a parent's experiences, whether it be from another meeting that I go to, whether it be from some research that's come out. I feel like we're all learning, and I think as parents, we often feel like we've got to just get it all right. And for me, I'm still learning all the time about parenting, about feeding my kids. So, I think we should all just expect that it's a journey. I know it's really cliche to say, but it is a journey, isn't it? The whole of this, we're all learning on the go. So yeah, be kind to yourself and don't feel like you've got to get it all right.
I love that. And with all things parenting, you nail something and then your child throws you a curveball anyway. So we're always happy to adapt.
Exactly.
So,
you've got a meal that they'll absolutely love, and then literally boom, won't eat that anymore.
Oh my goodness. We were like, Finley was adoring peppers, and I was like, oh brilliant, like peppers, great snack.
Yeah.
Bought like tons of peppers, hates peppers now.
Exactly. They love to.
So last week.
Make it not easy. Exactly. So last week.
So talk to us, Charlotte, about what actually is an ultra processed food, because I feel like it's kind of become a little bit of a buzzword, and we're seeing like UPFs everywhere.
Yeah.
What actually is it?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I was actually at a meeting last week where we were talking about this idea of actually that whole ultra processed food thing has become almost like trendy to use, and actually it's just not quite as clear cut as that. So it's all based on something that the World Health Organization created, which was a Nova scale. So this Nova scale splits foods into 4 categories: 1 which is unprocessed or minimally processed, 2 which is kind of processed culinary ingredients. So we're talking about things like the sauces that we use, foods that we're kind of using to add flavors to other foods. Then you've got your processed foods, and then you've got your group for ultra processed food.
Okay.
And the ultra processed foods are not foods that have just been slightly modified. They're likely to have undergone multiple processing methods, which results in, not very much or very little or really well adapted kind of, of the minimally processed food. So let's take, for example, an apple. If you've got an apple, that would be an unprocessed or minimally processed food. If you then slice that apple up, you cook it, you then add lots of different ingredients like sugar and salt. And sometimes as well, a lot of people are saying, you have to add things that you wouldn't have in your kitchen cupboard. So maybe you're adding some kind of emulsifiers to it, and then you're drying it, and then you're putting it into a packet, and then it's kind of preserved. You are then creating what we would call an ultra processed food. So you've taken a whole food and you've done multiple processes to it, usually in some kind of factory, added ingredients you wouldn't necessarily normally have at home, and you end up with an ultra processed food. It's really hard to differentiate, and there's lots of arguments about what counts as processed and what counts as ultra processed, and also there's slightly differing variations. Even in a workshop I went to the other day, there was, from the experts in the room, there were slight different variations. So don't worry if a parent you can't figure it out, but largely it's about foods that are in packets that have been processed in quite a significant way, and largely those that contain ingredients that you probably would not have in your kitchen cupboards. That's a good way to kind of think about ultra processed.
I often think, Charlotte, if I can't pronounce it, then it's probably not a great thing to be eating.
Well, yeah, exactly. Although sometimes you can take things that are, in nature, a lot of the kind of, I'd say, chemicals that make up an apple, we probably couldn't actually, be able to pronounce some of those. So I totally get it. Like if you're reading a pack and you're like, I'm just not sure what that is, you might want to either check it, or you might want to say that's probably not something that I want to give. But, this is the trouble with nutrition. It's so nuanced. There is so much complexities. And also, I always think like we don't eat foods in isolation. We're not, we don't want to focus on like individual foods as being that's bad, that's good, because it's always about the entirety of what we're eating, the regularity, the kind of patterns of eating that we have. And that's what's really important for young babies and toddlers, is the patterns of eating that they develop, because those are instilled from quite a young age. So I always say we don't want people to be scared of foods or scared of ingredients. We just want us to look at the bigger picture. What are we doing the majority of the time, and trying to make sure that as much as we can, we're feeding our kids stuff that we are making at home, which I know is easier said than done.
My brand new book, Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth, is now available. So much more than a book, this is a guide that allows me to hold your hand through your birth preparation journey. With over a decade of experience and knowledge packed in to ensure you really are empowered in the way you deserve to achieve a positive birth, regardless of the twists and turns that crop up. Make sure that you get your hands on Midwife Pip's Guide to a Positive Birth book now, and are empowered to have the birth experience that you deserve. And that's what we love about you. It's not about being perfect. It's about being realistic and kind of knowing where you find your balance as a family, which is what we need in this very unperfect world of being families, isn't it? I think
exactly that. Nobody's perfect. Like, definitely my kids, this long bank holiday weekend, my kids have been to extra Easter egg hunts, parties, we've been eating out, being like, oh my God, what do we feed them? We absolutely have not had a perfect food this weekend. And that happens quite often in our house. So again, it's that what's going on the majority of the time that matters.
Absolutely. And so are ultra processed foods bad? Because I do feel like there's a label now of like, if it's ultra processed, that should be like a red flag or a red cross of something we shouldn't be feeding our children or we should be avoiding. Where do we find this balance?
Yeah, and that's really hard as well, because some of the foods that might be included as an ultra processed food. So, for example, you've got on one end of the spectrum, you might have bread, you might have plant-based milks, you might have some spreads, for example, and on the other end of the spectrum, which all within that ultra processed food group, you've got things like packet of crisps, ice creams, chocolate bars. So all of these this is the problem with this category. They are all lumped in together, so these are all ultra processed foods, and bread can be a really significant source of nutrients for young babies and toddlers. It can be a really great way to get carbohydrates, whole grains, energy, B vitamins into your baby's diet. Whereas, some of the crisps that are on offer are not going to do that. So it's all very well having this big category of ultra processed foods, but I definitely would not say all ultra processed foods are bad in any circumstance. And again, as I mentioned before, it's much more about looking at the entire diet. Foods individually on their own, if you and I, or if our babies had a packet of baby crisps right now, that doesn't make their diet bad. That means that in that moment they had foods that weren't particularly nutritious for them, and they might need extra nutrition later. That's literally what it means. But if their diet ends up being made up with a lot of those, so if we're relying on baby crisps every day, then that might become problematic, because they're actually missing out on nutrients, on fiber, and they're also developing habits of kind of eating food out of a packet. So like I said, it's so complicated. It's not this like black and white that actually the media want you to believe it. But like I said, if any of our kids right now had a packet of crisps, that's not bad. That's not bad. It's context that matters. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, I love that, Charlotte, because I think the media has made us think that if it's ultra processed, then we shouldn't be consuming it. And like you rightly say, actually, it's just not that simple. There's this big, vast variety within that. And I think even when we think about something like bread, there's such a vast variety in nutritional profiles of something like bread. So it almost goes more complex, another layer, doesn't it?
Exactly that. And I think, I love to come back to this idea of variety is what matters. And that's because, some breads contain some emulsifiers. And so there is some negative, some research around some of these that we shouldn't have in huge amounts in the body, but it's so complicated. And like I say, even the scientists are arguing over whether these are problematic or not, for example. So my take on it all is, if we always come back to this idea of variety, if you are going, do you know what? We do love bread. We are going to have bread in our house, but actually, sorry, my cat.
That's okay. We're a family podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But if we are going to come back to this idea of, do you know what? Variety is really important. So if you're having one bread one week, you have a different one the next week. If you are relying a lot on bread, swap your carbs out. Choose, instead of bread, we'll have rice or potato or pasta, or maybe we choose some wholemeal pita breads, or maybe we have crumpet. It's all about that variety, because variety ultimately means that you're not likely to be having too much of anything. And it's also great for kids, especially when they're young, to get used to variety, so that they're not like, no, I only will accept that specific cereal, or no, I will only accept that loaf of bread that looks like that. The more you build that variety into their diet early on, the more that you're kind of ticking off nutrition boxes, the more that you're not over relying on something that might have nutrients in that aren't great, and the more that you're allowing your little one to get used to a variety, so they're less likely to be really stuck on certain ones. So variety is what I come back to. Sorry, I could talk forever, so you're going to have to rein me in, Pip.
No, I love it. It's passion. And because as a parent, our goal, the thing that we all want to avoid, is having a child that is a fussy eater. Like, none of us want to be that child that will only eat plain pasta for breakfast, lunch and dinner. And so, like you say, actually from those baby stages, having a variety of flavour, texture, all those different senses is so important.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously there are some children who might be, neurodivergent, and it's a different kettle of fish for those children, because there might be reasons like ARFID, for example, that they are very specifically only want certain types of food, and that is a different kettle of fish. And it's really, really tricky to work with that. You need to work with a healthcare professional to gently allow your child to explore more. But for other children, yes, and starting from a very young age, so from around 6 months of age, really building that variety in nicely to allow them, because babies like what they are familiar with. So if we can build familiarity, I always think this with my kids, they never expect a certain type of bread. And we've had friends come to our house before whose kids have been like, this isn't bread. But my kids would never expect bread to be a certain way, because their entire life they've had maybe like supermarket bread. They might have had sourdough. They might have had homemade bread. They might have had seeded malt loaf bread. You know, they've had such a variety that if you whack down anything on their plate, they would never question it. But for other families who maybe do tend to stick to the same bread, if they come round our house and we're like, here's your Marmite on toast, and they're going, I can't accept that. I can't accept that toast. So, you know, back to that point of that variety really helps.
That's so interesting. And coming to variety, now I watched you on the Panorama documentary, which was fantastic, so eye-opening. Me and my husband genuinely had such a great conversation off the back of it. So yeah, thank you.
Love it.
Brilliant. So but one of the things talking about variety that cropped up with the use of pouches, which I'm guessing come in the UPF category, was around texture.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about how pouches and UPFs can kind of fit in or not fit in.
Oh, I love this topic. This is so important. So I think a lot of parents do not realise this. A lot of parents might know that pouches are, you know, blended, that there's over-reliance on fruit. But what a lot of parents don't know is that actually the spouts are not really recommended. There's a few reasons for this, but one of them is because the spouts limit the size of the food that can come out of them. So it means that you're always going to have the texture of that pouch be a certain texture. And we know that during weaning, one of the important things about weaning babies is we are teaching them to eat. We're teaching them to bite, to chew, to swallow, to explore textures. And variety of textures is key in this too. So rather than it being like blended, we want to be blended, and then we're moving on to mashed, and then we're moving on to minced, and then we're moving on to just kind of chopping food for babies. If they're solely relying on pouches, they're not going to be exposed to the foods in that way, because they're always going to be limited in terms of the texture. And also quite often, because the food is cooked quite significantly inside, it's quite soft textures as well. So, and also from like a choking risk point of view, those companies have to be very careful. So they can't be giving, you know, big hard lumps of food that are in the middle of the rest of their pouch. So they do have to be careful from a safety perspective, and that makes sense. But one of the problems is over relying on them and not allowing babies to learn how to bite and chew and swallow, and how to deal with a really wide variety of textures and how to move through those textures so that eventually they're eating the kinds of foods that we eat as adults. And I've seen in my time working in this field so often that parents who do over rely on those pouches quite often find it very hard to get babies off of those onto family foods, because actually the eating is a lot more complicated when you're taking a spaghetti bolognese that's just been chopped up a little bit. That's very different to a spaghetti bolognese that you're going to get in a pouch. So that is really key. It's something parents don't often know about, and it is one of the problems with these spouts and over relying on pouches. Does that answer your question on that?
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that you notice with, like, for example, spaghetti bolognese that you cook at home, it's never going to taste exactly the same.
No.
Whereas in a pouch, it is forever the same. So you almost create that bread analogy with spaghetti bolognese. And then when you've got that with everything, it becomes really tricky, right?
Exactly that. And like, you know, you can taste it different in a pouch. Your baby will too. And again, babies like familiarity. If they become familiar with the spaghetti bolognese that they've bought in that pouch, and you then go, do you know what, I'm going to make this for you, they're going to be like, no, doesn't taste the same. It's much more chunky, it's much more textured, it's not got the same flavors and ingredients. I want my pouch one because that's what I'm used to. And honestly, the number of times that parents come to me saying my little one will not eat my food and will only eat pouches, it's so common. And that is why, because if we over rely on them, babies get used to them, they're going to reject our own versions of them without a doubt.
Yeah, it makes total sense, doesn't it? If you put yourself in a baby's developmental
shoes
through this kind of journey, it makes total sense. So we know that they fall into this UPF umbrella category. So we're not saying that they're categorically always bad, but we're saying that they shouldn't be part of our day-to-day breakfast, lunch, dinner diet. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's about, you know, it's going to be different for every family depending on your situation, your context, your work life, your finances. All of that needs to be taken into account. That's why you can't say, yeah, you should only have these once a week, boom. Because like I say, everyone's situation is different. But what I would say is that we really want to make sure that families are largely focusing on their baby having their home cooked family meals, the flavors, the textures, the ingredients that you use in home cooking. Those are so important to teach your baby how to accept family meals. If we don't teach them to accept family meals, they are going to have to over rely on those pouches, and they're going to end up wanting them more and more. And then you're going to have trouble later on down the line at getting them to accept things like nursery meals, school meals, your family home cooked meals. So again, it's about the majority of the time that eating similar foods to what you guys eat as a family. So if as a family you eat lots of curry, then bringing those kind of flavors into their repertoire early on in weaning is great. If as a family you rely on like really typical English meals, like your fish and chips and your spaghetti bolognese and your beans on toast type of meals, I'm not saying you would necessarily offer those from really early on, but maybe bringing in those kind of flavors and ingredients. The spaghetti bolognese can be offered really early on, and fish and chips, you could offer a kind of version of fish and chips that's suitable for babies, so that you're starting to get them used to your family meals. And that is such a good way of helping your baby to accept more and also accept your home cooked meals, which I know is really disheartening when you make them and they're rejected, but it is about building that familiarity up. But yeah, I know it's easier said than done.
Absolutely. Or even worse than them being rejected, Charlotte, you then have to clean them off the kitchen floor.
Yeah. When you've spent like 20-30 minutes making it.
Nothing more insulting than that.
Oh,
I'm going to rub
I
it
know.
all in my hair and throw it all on the floor.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think I've really noticed a difference, Charlotte, I think weaning 2 children.
Yeah.
Because with my first, it was like you kind of had so much more time to dedicate to making all these baby safe things.
Yeah.
Whereas with Alfie, to be honest, it was like, right, let's introduce him to food. Let's do the allergens. And then I was like, he just needs to eat what we're eating now. Because there isn't time to fuck around. And it's actually been so much more beneficial because he's got into the family food habit a lot quicker and a lot easier. And no one's got time in busy families to be doing 1,000 different things. So the quicker you get them eating what you're eating, the easier it is to avoid those allergens.
And we're not talking about them having to have your exact meal, but it might be that you're like, right, this is what I'm having today. I'm going to take a little bit of chicken that's in a nice strip. I'm going to take a tiny bit of this sauce, and I'm going to take some rice, and I'm going to pop that on a plate, and my baby can explore that a little bit. So it doesn't have to be your entire meal. It can just be elements of it. Yeah. A lot of, in my latest book that's just come out, so much of what I talk about in there is, here's a recipe, here's how you adapt it for a parent, or here's how you adapt it for a baby. And I'll say things like, at this point, you can take this part of the meal out if you like and give it a little blend if you're giving it to a young baby, so that you're always making sure that the meals that you're having are suitable for little ones. All you have to do is avoid choking hazards, adapt the texture slightly, and avoid salt and sugar in those. So add those to the end if you need to. That the world is your oyster, really. Babies can have so much more variety than we give them credit for, I think.
Definitely. And also, it's sometimes as parents a really powerful opportunity for us to sort of check our own nutrition.
Yes.
You can get into bad habits. When you've got a newborn and they're relying on milk and you're exhausted, it's so easy just rely on freezer meals and takeaways. But I think weaning becomes an opportunity to actually just recheck yourself as well for that role modelling.
Do you know how many, I've had so many families write to me saying, do you know what? I did not like cooking. I didn't really concentrate on my own health. And now I've been following your book, and I really enjoy it. I enjoy creating meals. It's increased my repertoire. And honestly, when I get those messages, I'm like, oh my God, the idea of just changing an entire family's eating, not just the baby, but everybody in the family. And I love that. And I think that it's really hard for some people, like I say, depending on context, knowledge, confidence, awareness, abilities, work life. But I think the more that you can throw yourself into, right, I'm going to spend some dedicated time to create some meals for my family this week. Bulk cooking some finger foods, putting things in the fridge and making them family meals that we all can have, you will make your life so much easier, honestly.
And save a fortune, like cost of living crisis and all that. Pouches are really expensive.
Yeah.
Actually cooking from scratch, you will definitely save a ton.
1,000,000%. I actually, Net Mums asked me to do a blog for them, which was baby meals on a budget. So basically taking the idea of some of these baby pouches and then creating a recipe that was on a budget. It was so easy. It was so easy to get them within a budget. Because if you think about some of the ingredients you're using, you know, and I do focus on like frozen foods, tinned foods as well, tinned fish, tinned beans, tinned lentils, tinned pulses. You know, frozen veg is one of my absolute favourite ingredients.
Frozen chopped onions, Charlotte, has changed my
Yes,
life. Who's got time to chop an onion?
exactly. Oh, I love it. Do you know what? I've got that on my shopping list to get, because I don't use them all the time, but when I do, I'm like, oh my God, here's a cup of, oh, it just makes such a difference.
Garlic
So,
and chopped
yeah,
onion, I never do from fresh anymore.
love it.
I always do it from the freezer.
Love frozen veg though, honestly. And people have this stigma that maybe it's processed or something wrong with it. And to be honest with you, it is to some degree processed, because actually it's been picked, it's been sometimes it's been blanched, so it's pre-cooked, and then it's popped in a bag and frozen. So that is processing, you know. But actually, what often happens is it's picked at its freshest. It's not cooked really, really well, because then it would go mushy. So it's only blanched a little bit, and then it's frozen, which actually locks in some of that nutrition and keeps it at that level. So sometimes, and I remember going on a program a while back doing a checking fresh versus frozen, and if you look at some of the foods on the shelf, sometimes frozen veg is actually more nutritious, contains certain more nutrients like vitamin C than some of the fresh that's available. So don't, you know, absolutely maximize on that, because it can really help, can't it?
And then get rid of food waste as well, which is so good, isn't it? I love that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly that.
Such a good one. Okay, so ultra processed, big umbrella term, but actually we don't have to be scared of it. We can lean into it when it works.
Yeah, definitely.
I love that. So what are some of the, I guess, biggest challenges that parents face with using ultra processed food, Charlotte? Because I think, just for like from my perspective, working mum, 2 children, they seem to always be hungry, they seem to always want food. I think I find the time and the convenience when you're out and about in particular a bit of a challenge. Have you got any advice for parents that are like, yes, I really want to do all this stuff from scratch, but I just can't work it out really?
Well, first of all, I think I totally agree with you. I think some of the things that parents struggle with: time, confidence, and budget. When it comes to time, that's definitely my problem too. And I struggle with that all the time. Every week I'm like, I have to try and carve out time to go, right, I'm going to finish my work this time and then I will cook that meal. And obviously some people don't have the luxury of doing that. And also I'll be like, right, I know I've got to pick the kids up on this day and they're going to need something. So I'm going to make, you know, chocolate raisin bread now, slice it all up, pop it in the fridge or freezer, and then take bits as and when. So it's really tricky. But one thing that I found when I was writing my How to Feed Your Family book, that was one thing I really struggled with. I had 2 young kids. Ada was a baby when I started writing it. And I remember just feeling, or no, maybe she wasn't. She was a toddler. She was a young toddler. And I remember just feeling so overwhelmed with coming into the kitchen and being like, right, I've now got to prepare meals for all these kids. And what I started doing was carving out an hour to an hour and a half on one day a week where I would prep a couple of meals and a couple of snacks. And if you can tap into really easy ones and you utilize your freezer well, so freezing things in small containers that you know you can pop out and do the night before, makes a big difference. And the same with snacks, always having something in your freezer that you can just grab and go, right, I'm popping that in the fridge, I'm going to use those tomorrow. It will save your future self so much. So that's one thing I would say. The second thing, which is also really important, which I should have said first, is do not worry about relying on those pouches every now and then. You know, I said this on this morning, throwing them in your bag and going, just in case they're there, thinking, getting home in the end of the day and going, oh my God, I've got nothing to cook. Okay, I'm going to use one of these. It's just some ways that you can use it. Try and team it with something else. Try and offer some finger foods alongside it. Don't rely on it on a really, really regular basis, but absolutely do rely on it, because the whole point in it, it should be there as a convenient little safeguard for you. So that's what I would say. And yeah, like I say, carve out that time. Try and make sure that you kind of, in your headspace, you've got some meals to create during the week. Find some that work for you. So at the moment, I've been relying on a few. So for example, it will be egg fried rice, absolute winner. Frozen veg, such a winner, isn't it? Especially if you use the pre-cooked pouches, which again, processed food. But if you check the pouches for what's on the back and try and go with the ones that don't have added salt and emulsifiers and other ingredients, and go with the ones that are just rice. So pre-cooked rice, frozen veggies, crack an egg in. Sometimes I add things like tofu, peanut butter to add flavour, maybe a little bit of soy sauce for older kids, and stir that through, and boom, you've got a meal. I also do an orzo, like I have a really easy tomato orzo, which is really versatile. So like we've talked about, I think it's garlic actually in that one. So chuck a bit of garlic in, chop tomatoes, or you can use tinned tomatoes. Add in orzo, add a couple of little flavours, stir it round, leave it to cook. Takes about 10-15 minutes. Absolute winner. And again, I crumble
because it's so soft, isn't it?
Exactly, it's perfect for babies. And I crumble tofu on the top of that, or sometimes I do it for my kids with prawns, depending on what they want, and that's, you know, easy as well. So have a couple of meals up your sleeve that you're like, right, I know this is an easy one. It takes me 10 minutes to do it. Like frittata as well. That's the other thing I often rely on, is a frittata. I've got nothing to cook, frozen veg, quick egg, bit of cheese or nutritional yeast on top, boom, I've got a whole meal that will work really well for the family. So few up your sleeve. So that was convenience. Use the pouches. Please don't worry about it, just not all the time. Have a few up your sleeve and try and dedicate a little bit of time each week to prepping where you can. Do you have anything to add? Because I mean, you're a parent and I know you're doing this really regularly yourself.
Yeah, I mean, really similar. So we've started putting a whiteboard in the kitchen and planning what we're eating for dinner, because I found the decision fatigue, having to decide what to feed all these people every day, was driving me mad. So I was like, everyone choose a favourite. Finley adores fish pie, so I'm like, easy win, fish pie. Super easy to adapt for Alfie, loves the fish pie. I do a similar orzo with salmon, so I'll pre-cook some frozen salmon or some fresh salmon earlier on in the day, and then when I get Finley from preschool, I can cook the orzo. I grate a courgette in it because he hates courgette but doesn't notice it in there.
Nice.
I use a bit of dairy-free cream cheese because my youngest has got a cow's milk protein allergy, but Finley doesn't notice the difference. Mix it all in, and it literally takes 10 minutes, and the kids go mad for it.
Love it. So I need that recipe.
Yeah, it's like ridiculously easy. And then sometimes Finley will sprinkle a little bit or a lot of cheddar cheese on top of his. But super, those kind of like safety nets. So if you are lacking confidence, you've kind of got stuff that you just know what you're doing, and then maybe one meal a week where you're a bit more experimental.
Exactly that. To be honest, that's what we do. I have, especially because I've been doing the recipes in my last book, because those are the ones that are familiar to me right now.
And I think what people might not realise, Charlotte, is you actually test everything that goes in the recipe book.
Absolutely.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I do work with a recipe developer who's amazing at creating delicious meals without salt and sugar. She's really good at helping me go, right, well, this goes with this, and this flavour will work really well in there to help them with the flavour. And sometimes she does these, like, it's quite basic ingredients, but when it comes out, I'm like, oh my God, that tastes so good. I don't even know how you've done it, but she's really great at that. But I work with her. I come up with the ideas. We develop the recipes together. She then does them to begin with and says, right, you need this and this and this. And then I will test those maybe 4 or 5 times each to make sure they work. So my family try them every single time without fail. With the meat ones, sometimes I'll just throw out, I'll put a different mince in, or I'll use chickpeas, and I always try and add versatility into the recipes. But at the moment, like I say, I've got about 5 recipes from that book. And a couple of other books that I'm using on rotation, because I'm like, we're in panic mode, when you're working so hard, you're in panic mode. So I'm like, I know I've got those 4 trusty meals. The kids will eat them. They're full of nutrition, and they take 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes at a push to make. And that's what I've been relying on the last week or so.
I love that. And to anyone thinking like, yes, I love this idea, but it all feels a bit new and a bit overwhelming because I'm not someone that is familiar in the kitchen. Yeah. Honestly, that is so me, Charlotte. I am not a kitchen-y person, but I embrace it. Charlotte's books aren't full of like crazy wild ingredients. It is really simple, and I think it's really nice to have that step-by-step hand holding. And I know I sent you a picture a few weeks ago of Finley making your fruit and veg flat.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Actually getting them involved, like he was loving that. It took him like a good half an hour because he did it all himself. But that was a great afternoon activity. We had one-to-one time. He was learning about beetroot and enjoyed trying that and getting it everywhere. And it's getting them involved as they become older is really powerful. But even as a baby, like pop them in their high chair and let them watch you. Let them have a little nibble on a bit of whatever. Getting them involved becomes a really nice sensory experience, doesn't it? And it ticks the box of making food and entertaining your child.
Yeah, and it also ticks the box of you're building familiarity with those foods. So, how I've banged on, while we've been talking about familiarity being important for children accepting. that cooking experience, even if they don't eat it right away, you're teaching them to see food, to smell it, to know what to do with it. You're teaching them cookery skills. You're showing them literally life skills and building acceptance of a variety of foods that maybe they won't eat right now, but actually they'll learn to eat it later. They'll know what it is. So, you know, a spring onion, for example, you know, if you're chopping up a spring onion and they're seeing you chopping it up, that's them going, yep, recognize, you know, imagine them being little robots going, beep, 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 yep, spring onion up. What does mummy do with that? She chops it like this. She throws it in my muffin. I've got some really great muffins that have spring onion in them that taste so good. And, you know, your baby are soaking up all this information in their brain. And the more you can get them to learn about food, the more they will accept it, not right away necessarily, but over time. And like I say, register, what do we do with this? Where does courgette go? You know, I've said to, you know, friends of like kids, friends from my son, you know, do you like courgette? And they're like, what's that? So, you know, some kids don't get exposed to it, but the more you can expose to courgettes, to all of these different foods, the more they're going to go, okay, I know what it is. And that builds familiarity and that builds acceptance. So it's all part of the package. So I love that you did that and are doing that.
And to be fair to children, courgettes and cucumbers do look awfully similar, don't they?
Well, exactly.
That's always like cucumber, courgette.
Yeah, what is that? Exactly that, yeah.
Oh, Charlotte, I could honestly talk to you all day because you are such a font of knowledge. And if you're listening and you have a baby, you're having a baby, you've got small children, you're trying to troubleshoot whatever feeding hurdle they might be throwing your way, do make sure that you're following Charlotte on social media. You've checked out her blog, because your blog, Charlotte, go into such incredible depth. There's so much incredible information on there. And of course, I actually don't know how you wean a child without just following Charlotte's book. So if you found another way, I'm super impressed, because all I have done is followed your lead and I've got two great eaters. So
that makes me so happy. Thank you so much. I can't tell you the outpouring of stuff about my book in the last couple of weeks. I don't know why, but in the last couple of weeks, I cannot tell you, I'm getting parents like literally writing me being like, I just want to thank you for your book. And I get that sporadically, you know, every now and then, or when I talk about it, but it's just been mad at the moment. So I'm so happy. And I can't tell you how honoured I feel that so many parents are like literally cooking recipes from my book and using my book and finding it useful as this handheld guide. So thank you, Pip, for saying that, because I honestly can't tell you the boost it gives me. Thank you.
Oh, Charlotte, you're such a wonderful person. She actually is as nice, guys, as she comes across as well. Thank you so much. I'll chat to you really soon.
Thanks, Pip. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate that.
If you have listened to this birth story, enjoyed it, and feel that you are ready to really embrace and dedicate yourself to having the most informed, supported, and empowered journey, and want to see if we may be able to support you in YPJ, your pregnancy and postnatal journey, please drop me a Instagram DM at midwife_pip, or get in touch on my email, pip@midwifepip.com, and let's chat through things and see if we might be a good match for each other. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and wishing you all the best on your journey through pregnancy, birth, and beyond.